Welcome to the Freestylers universe, baby. We got an incredible episode for you today. We have Bryant Michael Huether, the Thrival guide extraordinaire, up in the building. This man is one of the most gracious, heart-centered individuals I've ever met. Super connector beyond compare. Knows how to pull the threads of the way that people are actually going to connect and actually like matchmaking in such a way. It's so elegant, bro. Thank you so much for being who you are and showing up, hopping on the Freestylers Universe podcast to share a little bit about your journey, who you are, who this incredible soul is. Where would you like to start?
First and foremost, thank you so much, my beautiful brother. It's an honor to be here with you. I'm so grateful to know you and so glad you exist. And thank you for the invitation to hop on here. As you know, I've been intending to start a podcast of my own and getting in my own way and just hiding and playing small, and just attended an incredibly activating Arcadia festival with so many of our beautiful brothers and sisters, and just feeling really energized, really motivated, really inspired, and really wanting to ride this wave of momentum that has appeared in the aftermath of this really transformative experience. And yeah, there's just so much to get into. I'm so excited to devote some time and attention today to conversing with you. Always love chatting with you. Always love your energy, your way with words. You're an incredible super connector yourself. You're an incredible hype man, an incredible father, and just really, really profound friend. I love the way that you show up for the people in your life, and the way that you hold space, the way that you truly listen to what's really wanting to be spoken, even if it's not the words coming out. And you're really, it's one of your superpowers as well, is really hearing the heart and seeing the soul. So super stoked to be here.
Well, I got thrill bumps. Thank you, brother. Oh my goodness. That's a huge compliment. All right, let's go on a journey. Who was Bryant Michael Huether at 6 years old?
Whoa, 6 years old. At 6 years old, I was already older brother to my sister Hannah, my brother Colin, and my little sister Heidi. It's in first grade. Funny enough, my mom has told me this story that my first grade teacher at one of my parent teacher conferences told my parents that she was worried about me because I didn't have any friends, and that I struggled making friends.
Wow. So things have come full circle.
I was incredibly shy and timid as a kid. Yeah, into like my early teens, I was really, really timid. Around people I didn't know, around my siblings, around my cousins, I was a very different person. I've had to really chosen to really cultivate social skills, and extroversion does not come as innately as it might appear on the outside. Yeah. I still struggle a lot with social anxiety, and I feel very comfortable if I'm around enough people that I already know. But going into situations where I don't know anyone, I still freeze up, or I still get in my head, or can get blocked up. Working through that. Working as a server has been really profound in that aspect as well. But as 6-year-old Brian, I already had I feel like this growing responsibility to be helping watch out and take care of my younger siblings. So we're all pretty close in age. I was 16 months old when I first became a big brother, and then my next sibling was born the day before I turned 3, and then my little sister was born when I was 4.5, and my youngest brother Austin, who just visited me, he and my youngest sister in Austin. He was born 2 months after I turned 7, so there's 5 of us within. By the time I had just turned 7, there's 5 of us, and so most of my childhood, I was the big brother. I had to keep an eye out on them. So even though we'd goof off and have fun, I'd always have to have like one foot in like play and one foot in like kind of like making sure things didn't get too far. And because I was the one responsible if somebody got hurt or something, we made a mess or this or whatever happened. So I realized throughout my life how that's played into shaping my personality and made it at times more challenging to fully surrender to play and to fully surrender to just allowing myself to be free to express however I want to express. So
That's so wild. That's amazing. Because you're a shining example to me and to so many of our soul fam of just living so freely, constantly dancing, grooving, having such a blast, getting video footage of people while not knocking off your own flow state, being in the midst. Like, it's so amazing that the contrast is really where the juice is.
Yeah, it's profound, and like how many evolutions of Bryant there have been. And I mean, I hated to dance. Like even in college, like I did not like to dance, and the only time I ever danced was if I had alcohol. Yeah, it's
wow.
And I feel
what
like,
shifted?
Oh man, so much. Yeah, learning to love myself.
Just everything.
Everything. Literally everything, except learning to accept all parts of myself, learning to let go of or loosen. I still struggle with people pleasing or worrying or being concerned with other people's perceptions of me, but loosening that and like learning to give fewer fucks and recognizing that like ultimately I'm the one living my life, and at the end of the day, like people can think whatever they want about me, but there's many things that have gone into that, like actually finding true friends, and recognizing, back to the friendship thing, recognizing that requires me to allow myself to be seen for who I actually am. Because in high school, the way I describe it, I grew up in a very small town in western South Dakota. Had 30 kids in my graduating class, 29 actually. Most of the years we had
29.
Yeah.
Wow. How big was the town?
Less than 1,000 people.
Wow. So everyone was in everyone's business.
Exactly. So there's a lot of benefits that came from that. I got to be super involved with whatever I wanted to. I was in any sport I wanted to play. By senior year, I was captain of basketball, cross country, and track. I was yearbook editor. I was student council treasurer, vice president, and president. I was in National Honor Society. I was in all these different things because there was access to it. And so I was in lots of different groups, right? I did really well in school, but I always felt like I was friends with everybody, but friends with no one. And what I mean by that is like I got along with everyone, and I truly cared about all these different people, even if they didn't like hang out or they were different circles. And even in a small school, like the circles aren't even that distinct because everyone still knows each other. But there's still a little bit, it can still get kind of cliquey. And yeah, I always felt kind of on the outside looking in because I'd hear about some of my friends hanging out outside of school. But I would always go home and I'd just like do my schoolwork, or I'd be really active. So like I'd have sports practice or games in the after school anyway. So like I was so busy that I didn't really have time to have a separate social life. And I didn't really need that because I was interacting with people enough that it was kind of built into the activities that I was in. But I recognized like in high school, I was starting to grapple with my sexuality, and growing up in a really Christian conservative community and family, felt like I knew enough that that wasn't what was quote unquote right, or that I was told that God designed humans, like man and woman, to end up getting married. So I trusted like eventually that I'd be attracted to women, but I was finding that I was attracted to other boys and didn't feel like I could talk to anyone about that. So because that was going on within me, and we're in high school and people are starting to talk about like, who do you like? Or like, you should date this person or that person. I felt like I was keeping people at a distance because I didn't want people to like start exploring or like getting too close. And when I was trying to figure out who the fuck I was. So
Right.
retrospect, back then I was like, why? I don't get it. Like I'm showing up like I love all these people. Why aren't they like, why am I not closer to them? And then I've recognized over the years, I didn't allow them to get close to me.
Out of your own judgment of self?
Well, yeah, out of shame, fear of what would happen if they actually knew who I was.
Oh. Oh. Let's pull on that thread.
Yeah, growing up in a small town, everyone knows everyone, but really the way I frame it, or I like to rephrase it, everyone assumes they know everyone.
Everyone
They
has an
think
awareness of everyone.
yeah, or they think that they know who you are. And then there's also this phenomenon that is quite limiting and really sad at times, is that people have like this freeze frame of who someone is. So like there's a lot of people who choose to stay there after high school, and like, or there's certain moments or certain versions of someone that people can get stuck with because the other people in the town like have this perception of like, oh, that's who you are. And then they don't allow for this space of evolution or growth. They're just like, oh, we already know who you are. And if that was like a version of you that was maybe someone who got in a lot of trouble or was into drugs or even if you were the opposite, you were like a football star or something else, like you can get kind of like locked into like people thinking, oh, like that's who you are. You're this. And there's also there can also be a lot of pressure, especially those of us from a family with like, my dad was really esteemed in the community. He was the general manager and human resource director at this big tourist attraction in my hometown. So we have a small town, but thousands of people visit our town in the summertime because we're really close to the Badlands National Park and we're on the way to Mount Rushmore. And
which, by the way, the Badlands is unbelievably gorgeous.
So remarkable. So insanely spectacular.
And you grew up there?
Grew up there. That was my backyard. My dad grew up on a ranch that you had to drive through like the Badlands National Park to get to. My mom also grew up on a cattle ranch. Yeah.
Wow.
That was my backyard growing up. We would go out to the Badlands like at least a few times a month. We'd go out there rock hunting, not in the park. You're not allowed to take any rocks from the national park, but we'd go out to like my grandparents' land, or there's like some other like open public lands that you can go out on, and like it's legal to like pick up rocks, and we'd find these beautiful like agates. And this is a state gemstone. It's called the Fairburn agate, and so this is like what we would go hunting for. It has these beautiful like bands in it.
Wow.
Yeah, we'd find all sorts of really beautiful agates and fossils and quartz. But yeah, that was growing up in that small town. It was I lived there my first 18 years of my life. My mom was really active in our church, and so she led a lot of the youth ministry stuff. So in a lot of ways, I was like a pastor's kid, even though she wasn't a pastor, but very similar roles. And then Everyone knew of my family, my dad's. So that put a lot of pressure on myself, in addition to me already being this big brother to 4 younger humans, that were looking
Mm.
up to me and following me. And so feeling this pressure to like be as perfect as possible. So I really cultivated a lot of perfectionist tendencies. Didn't feel like I was ever doing enough or good enough. I got straight A's. I was in all these different things, but I felt like it was still like, felt like I had to continuously prove my worth or my worthiness of love, especially as this inner turmoil was going on. It was like, oh, like this is going on. I have to really make sure like I don't slip up in anything else because
Mm.
yeah. Mm.
So how did you move through this? How did you flow through this? Clearly lots of resistance, a lot of judgment of self is what I'm gathering, a lot of, like shame. And then also there's the external factors of, the pressure of the church society and kind of that role within that ecosystem, your family dynamics, being the older brother and having 4 younger siblings that even though it might not have been stated specifically that you felt accountable and responsible for to a large degree.
Mm.
How did you transition? How did you?
Well, once I get into like middle school and high school, I started middle school, especially I had a phase of just isolating. I was grateful that I got my own room when I was like 12, I think, around that age. And then my other 4 siblings, like the 2 sisters and 2 brothers, shared rooms. So that helped just to give me some space to like um to process things, because being in a house with 7 people is a lot of math, a lot of fun sometimes, but also a lot of just like irritation. And in high school, I really have found being overly active in all these extracurriculars was in its own way a coping mechanism, and I'm really grateful for it because it opened up doors to be able to get out of the state and go out. Like I ended up going to the University of Kansas, and that was another big part of the journey. Is like I knew I needed to get away. I needed some separation. My
Mm.
mom really wanted me to stay in state. If she had chosen, she would have had me go to the South Dakota School of Mines in Rapid City, like 45 minutes away. I chose to go like almost 10 hours away. And that was a big
Mm.
thing where she was really, really struggled with that. Understandably so, I'm her oldest. And, but I knew I needed to get away. And like in high school, I kept myself so busy with all these things that it kind of allowed me to not actually be with what I was feeling a lot of the times. And yeah, going to college, I was like, I got to keep pursuing God. I was still trusting. I was praying that like I would be normal and that this sexuality I was experiencing would be, um, was just a phase, or that if I just needed to continue to pursue God, and that it would work itself out. So got to college, got involved with different Christian ministries, and then ended up co-founding a Christian fraternity while I was there with a bunch of guys from that had grown up in different denominations. So it was really beautiful, the conflict
Really?
they had. Yeah. But so I got really involved with that as well. I became like treasurer and then vice president of that. And we put on a lot of different events, and um, really got to realize like my love for bringing people together and co-creating, and put on this big free festival in like the park in my college town. And um,
No way.
yeah, so um,
Foreshadowing.
yeah, and I created like this weekly prayer gathering my senior year of college, which was one of my things I'm most proud of. We would meet at the top of this hill on campus, and it was like this beautiful circle, like anywhere from like 6 people to a couple dozen would show up, and we just go around and share what's on our hearts, and like we'd take turns praying for each other and for our campus and for the world. And it was this beautiful
Mm.
people from lots of different campus ministries, because prior to that, like a lot of it was cliquey. Like there was all these different organizations, but they were very like distinct and like separate. And so being in my fraternity helped me open my eyes to like, oh, we're from these different sectors of this. How can we come together and like recognize the commonalities are much stronger than like what perceived differences on how we choose to interpret things, or put into practice our spirituality. So that was really beautiful. So it was honestly,
Can we double click on that for a second real
let's do it.
quick? Because that's a huge component. To take, there's an overarching thesis of with that description of being Christian, right? But yet there's so many denominations, different ways that people frame and create separation
Yeah.
where there was once unity. And so it feels like where there was unity and then it went to big separatism, you were being an integrative force, bringing people together, right? Regardless of the differentiation, but finding that commonality.
Yeah. So that was another big foreshadowing moment that I've in recent years like been able to reframe and be like, oh, that's something really profound and something I want to really find ways to bring that type of concept into my current reality. Back to that question, like that. So that internal struggle with my sexuality, which was inherently intertwined with my spirituality, because I was trained to believe certain things about God and the world and reality through a Christian perspective. And my own lived experience was in direct conflict to what I was being told. Like me having a desire to follow God, because I was being told that type of same-sex attraction, for example, is a byproduct of turning away from God or of being sinful or being that it was in opposition, it was an abomination to what is true and what is right and who I was created to be. So when I was recognizing that, I was praying every day and journaling, and then got to college and was really trying to be active in like serving God, and still it was present there. By my last year of college, I was like experiencing incredibly dark depression. I was getting to a point where certain classes I got behind on stuff and I just like let some things go. I'd
And
never
you were
gotten
Mr. Straight A student,
never
leading
got
all
less.
sorts of organizations. Whatever you need, I got you.
Yeah, like I had never got less than an A in high school, and in college I got a couple B's in a few classes, but then never got anything worse than a B in my life. And then
Wow.
last semester there was a class, and it's hilarious because it was a GIS class, like Geographic Information Systems, and that's hilarious because I ended up getting degrees in international studies and geography, but my first position after college was a GIS technician. That's a whole nother story. But this GIS class, I got behind on a project or so, and then I was just like, I realized what I needed to do to pass the class, and I just did the bare minimum. Ended up getting a D in that class. And most of my other ones, I like got A's in.
Hold up. How did that feel?
That was a whole nother thing. I like felt so much shame around, and I was like, what the like later.
You must have been beating yourself up like crazy.
Yeah. But it was also in the midst of this really dark depression. So I was beating myself, but it was also like, I was just in this, like, I don't even fucking care anymore. I had put all this energy into this Christian fraternity and building this brotherhood. And then I felt like there was these rules that from like, it's a national fraternity. We just happened to co-found the chapter at our university, and they had specific rules that you couldn't be gay and be in the fraternity. And there was actually a kid that got kicked out of Vanderbilt's, chapter because he came out as gay, and they're like, you're not allowed here. So
wow,
I was experiencing a lot of that. I had been vice president like my junior year of college, and then by my senior year, I just stopped showing up. I just stopped being active in the fraternity. I wasn't serving as an officer anymore, and started drinking. That's another thing. As officers, we weren't allowed to drink alcohol. They didn't have like a strict stance across the board for all the members, but they were like, members can drink responsibly if they're of age, but like officers can't be drinking at all. And I was never really drawn to alcohol that much. A lot of people in my hometown got stuck in that because there's not a lot of other things to do. But I did start drinking a bit my senior year, and just to kind of escape to numb what was going on, and that was, like I said, kind of a way that I felt like I could kind of start loosening up a little bit, because I was just so tense all the time. I was expending so much energy to put on this like facade and these masks and like keep people at a bay. Cause I was like, all these perfectionist tendencies, I have to show up perfectly. I have to like act like I have all my shit together. So even in that depression, I was still working a lot to like on the outward, like make it seem like everything was fine. Even though internally I was like starting to have my first of many existential crises. Yeah. So, that was when I first started like exploring with men. Was my senior year of college, my first kiss I had and everything. And then it starting to like, I was starting to realize, oh, like this is actually, I've been fighting this, but like, this is like what I'm attracted to. Like I'm attracted to men. And so starting to actually own that instead of like running away from it was like a huge first step, even though there continued to be all this shame of like this is wrong, or this isn't like how it's supposed to be. But it started to like loosen up. So I was like, well, if I do believe that God created me and like, who I'm supposed to be, like that's part of it. And like, and so it started to be like, okay, like I think started to loosen like my frustrations with this concept of God, and then directing it more towards the frustrations with people's interpretation of the Bible or Christianity and spirituality. And so it started to allow myself to kind of zoom back out and recognize like I do believe that there's some higher force. I was choosing to believe that in large part from my own sanity, but allowing myself to kind of in many ways start from scratch of like what that looks like.
Wow. It sounds like a tangled web. A whole lot of external factors going in. You've got your intuitive guidance. You've got your connection directly with God, with Source. I like to say GUS. It's an acronym: God, Universe, Source.
I like that.
You got your connection with Gus, and it's vibrant, and then so many blockages in how to express yourself.
Yeah.
So then what?
So, man, I was working this job after college that I absolutely hated, but felt this pressure. I need to get a job after college. And it took a little while to get one. Ended up being a GIS technician. And at that moment I was like, how beautifully ironic that like I had this shame around the worst grade I got being in that class. And then my first job after college. And then it really helped remind me like, man, like it really doesn't, like grades don't matter that much. And also I'm really grateful for my high school version of myself, because by excelling in the ways I did, it opened up paths to receive scholarships to be able to afford leaving the state to go out of state. Cause I paid for all my college myself, other than parents helping here and there with some loans, but it was mostly student loans. And then I worked every summer since I was 14. So yeah, I was working this job for like a year and a half, and it absolutely hated it. And one of my best friends and I were talking about quitting our jobs. We'd started getting into like podcasts and discovered Tim Ferriss and the 4-Hour Work Week. And we're like both miserable. And we're like, hey, like we got to do something different. We decided we were going to travel for we were going to quit our jobs and travel for 6 months. So I spent 6 months planning. We were going to leave the 27th of February of 2014. I graduated college in 2012 and then worked this job from like, I think the fall of 2013 till like February of 2014. And just getting super excited. I found out about this website called Workaway, which is like this global network of farms and hostels and different hosts where you go do a work exchange. And so we were going to work at hostels in Costa Rica for 3 months. And then we were going to go to Brazil for the World Cup and work at hostels there. We applied to get like, there was like a lottery system for the World Cup that year. And we applied and got tickets to a quarterfinal game in Rio for the World Cup. And at this time I was really into like credit card hacking and everything. So we got a couple of credit cards. We were going to get all our flights like covered. And I spent 6 months doing like research and getting everything planned. I love planning stuff, and like hadn't left the country yet, but I was like, this feels right. Like I had this desire to travel. And one of the great things about my hometown is we didn't have enough people to work all the jobs in my town in the summer. So we'd hire, like, there'd be like up to 100 international students living in my hometown in the summers from all over Europe, Taiwan, China, Ghana, Jamaica, like so many different countries. And so I got to cultivate connections with these people. And and that paired with my love for geography, and then ended up studying that in college, in international studies. I was like, I want to travel the world. I want to go explore these different places, like learn about these, like how other people live their lives, what they believe in, how they see the world, what their perspectives are. So I had this deep desire to travel. And so it was just like, it just felt really right. I'm like, this feels like the right move. And we're getting closer and closer to that date, getting things ready. And then 3 weeks before our flight was scheduled to depart, my dad passed away unexpectedly. And so,
Whoa.
out of nowhere.
3 weeks before?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. So that flipped my world upside down. Ended up moving back home to, my youngest brother was 17 at the time, and he was home when that happened. And my dad passed away at home. He had a blood clot that caused a heart attack. And that, yeah, like he was the most incredible man in my life. Like such an incredible human being. Everyone loved him. He commanded respect because he was just really powerfully present with people. Like one of the most common things I've heard about him after he passed was like, when people would tell me, they're like, your dad made me feel like I was the most important person in the world when he was speaking with me.
Mm. Well, brother, you definitely embody that attribute.
Thank you. That's highest compliment. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow. So did you go travel? Did you?
No, like I went back home. I was still wanting to do the trip. My best friend actually drove up with another friend of ours to the funeral, and in the like week or so after that, I was like, I still want to do at least part of this trip. I really wanted to try to make it happen. And then my friend who drove up for it, it was in January, end of January, and there was like a blizzard on his way back to Kansas City where I had been living. And he had to drive in 4-wheel drive most of the way. And when he got back, he found out that really screwed up something on his car, being in 4-wheel drive for so long, and like ended up needing to like repair his transmission. And then right around that same time, his dad had filed for bankruptcy. So he had all this pressure to, he had a lot of financial stress. He was wanting to help out his dad. So those things combined with me losing my dad and then feeling called to be back home and like supporting my mom and my siblings. My 2 sisters took off semesters from school to be back home. I was like, it's just not the time for this. So had to let go of that. And that was its own profound added layer of grief. And that is something I had to unpack later too. And it helped me realize that grief is something that I think is really under discussed and under recognized for like the ways that it appears in our lives. And I think a lot of our a lot of people's depression and just a lot of people's mental health suffers because of not addressing grief. And oftentimes it's because we don't recognize it for what it is, because it's not always, we tend to think it's when you lose someone that dies that's close to you, which is obviously one of the most notable forms of grief. But anytime you have a pivot in life, or you lose a friend, or you break up with someone, or you make a move, or you are on one path and then even if you consciously and willingly choose to pivot and choose, even if it's not something that happens to you, there's an aspect of like grieving. And when we don't allow ourselves that, it can manifest in lots of other things where we can really start to suffer mentally or emotionally. And that's something I recognized. Losing my dad was its own thing that I was dealing with. And then I had spent so much time and put so much attention and intention into this traveling for 6 months that when I let go of that, it was just like another huge blow that I was dealing with, on top of the fact that my dad was no longer physically with us.
It's a lot, bro.
Yeah.
And then at this point, did you already share with your family about your sexuality?
Oh, thank you for that question. So leading up to this, I was starting to come out to friends in Kansas City, and I think the first friend I told was about 2012. And that was a huge moment, because she grew up in a similar home. Her dad was a youth pastor. She knew how difficult it was. She was friends with a lot of my Christian fraternity. And she opened up about something she was dealing with a relationship. And by her sharing and being vulnerable with me and crying, like, I felt incredibly safe to open up to her. So as she gets finished, we were driving around, she gets finished talking, and we're both kind of crying. And then I'm like, oh, there's something I want to tell you. And as soon as I say that, I immediately lock up. It took like 20 minutes driving around for me to speak up. He was like so concerned. She's like, what is it? What's wrong? And I physically couldn't get it out, because I had so much just apprehension and tension and fear of being rejected, even that it was like, it felt to my body like it was a life or death situation. And that if I chose to say this, it meant death. It meant that I was going to die. And in many ways, like, that was true for me. Yes.
You're living the grief of that older identity.
Yeah. So me finally getting it out was so cathartic, and it was like, oh my, and she was crying and holding me. She's like, oh my gosh, I love you. And I had to be so hard. And it was like, oh my gosh, it was like I had been gasping for air for years, and I finally could breathe again.
Hallelujah.
Yes, that was a moment, and it took a little while before I told the next spread. And then I think by Christmas of 2013, there's probably about 10 or 12 people from back in Kansas City that knew. And so I felt pretty good, and I was feeling like the momentum building. And so I was back home for Christmas, and somehow the topic of homosexuality came up amongst my family, and I was getting really agitated. And I texted like my sisters, and I was like, hey, I'd love to chat with you. This was a little bit after that conversation, but I wanted to go talk to them, because my youngest sister, I knew she would be cool with it, because one of her best friends was openly gay. I still hadn't told her. So then that helped become a catalyst, because I was feeling this like frustration. I'm like, oh, like, I need you to know this. So told my two sisters, and they both started crying, because they knew how hard it was for me. And like, it was a really beautiful experience. They got to share some stuff with me, and we got to really connect more deeply. But I was only home for a couple more days, and I just didn't, that was a lot energetically. Every time early on when I would come out, it would be really relieving, but it would also be its own form of like I've heard framed before, like this concept of like a vulnerability hangover. And there was some truth to that concept.
Vulnerability hangover?
Yeah. I think maybe Brene Brown or someone that she talked to had phrased it that way once. And I felt that to be true, because I was like, oh man, that like, it took a lot out of me just to tell them, even though they were open about it. So I was like, okay, like that was a lot on my nervous system. And I was hopeful I would be able to tell my parents and my brothers in the next couple months. And I was planning to. Just didn't feel like I wasn't ready at that moment. So that was Christmas. The last time I saw my dad, I went back to Kansas City, and then my dad passed 29th of January, and so I never told him before he passed. And then I told my two brothers that.
How did that impact you?
that was really difficult, but yeah, the other big thing that was really challenging for me was my dad called me the night he passed away. I was watching a basketball game with my roommates, and one thing I really bonded on with my dad was watching Kansas basketball, and that's how I ended up going to that school. We would often talk about the game at halftime or afterwards. So I was with my two roommates watching it, and he called at halftime, and I was like, oh, like, I'll call him after the game. So I called back after the game, and my mom answered, or he didn't answer right away. And then my mom answered and said my dad wasn't feeling well. And I was like, that's strange. My dad never missed a day of work my entire lifetime for being sick. He might have felt sick at times, but like he was never sick.
Wow.
But that was a whole nother thing that was, I think, even harder for me, is the fact that he called me and I didn't answer. So I didn't get to talk to him that night. I think with the sexuality, like, I really wish I would have told him, but I feel like deep down he knew. And then also, like, I just choose to believe that, yeah, like, it's just the timing, like it is as it should be. And I haven't recognized or noticed it being something I struggle with too much since then, of like that particular thing, not getting to tell him. Like, I wish I would have told him. And there's many times where I expressed to friends that I would have rather told my dad than my mom. It was much harder to finally tell my mom. Because back then my mom was much more hypercritical of things. My dad was really gentle, really non-judgmental.
And you described him as somebody that has that deep presence with people. So to have that presence has to come from an objective vantage point, right? If I'm in my own emotions and I'm experiencing a conversation, you're saying something that doesn't align or agree with what I have inside, I'm not present anymore. I'm up here. So that objective vantage point.
Yeah.
Do you mind putting Do Not Disturb on?
Yeah. So I'm not about the song, but
don't worry, it'll spike.
Let's see. Boom, boom, boom. Yeah.
So we'll cut this part out, but basically we've got about another 10 minutes to bring it home.
Cool. Can you remind me where to click up on the do you have a MacBook?
Yeah, top right, and then go to your little like double bar icon.
Found it.
All the way on the top right, it's the control center, and then control center, click on Do Not Disturb.
Yeah.
So up on the top right of the menu that drops down.
At the control center, it's showing like the Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, all that, but I'm not seeing a Do Not Disturb button.
You might be on an old operating system too.
Yeah.
It's all good. We can just keep going, and then if we have to...
It was labeled as focus. Got it.
Yeah, bro. So we're in it. We've gone through a lot of this part of the journey, and I would love to hear more of this part and where you're taking all of this transmutation.
Yeah. So the starting to come out and then navigating the passing of my father really started to be a powerful catalyst of accelerated growth. I spent like a year and a half back home and was really feeling called to start traveling. So found out about, first of all, I got invited to Europe. So I got to go to Europe in end of December 2014, and then spent 4 weeks in January 2015. And that really like confirmed for me that I do have this desire to travel the world. So went back home, ended up working at a hostel in LA the following fall for a few months. And I worked at a hostel in Kauai in 2016, and then found out about this master's program from a friend of mine from that worked at the hostel in Hawaii. She's, I actually found out from another friend, but this friend from Munich, and I found out about this cartography program that happened to start out in Munich. So I applied while I was with her in Hawaii and ended up getting accepted, and got to crash with her my first couple weeks in Munich, and then ended up studying in Munich, Vienna, and Dresden for this map design program, which is super exciting. Love maps, love
Sounds
design.
fun.
Super fun. Had course mates from 16 different countries. All of our classes were in English. And during this time is when I discovered Aubrey Marcus and several other people in the space of podcasting. I had discovered Tim Ferriss first, and then discovered like Aubrey and Tom Bilyeu with Impact Theory, and Lewis Howes, and the Model Health Show, and
John Stevenson.
Yeah. So was getting into that, had read like the Power of Now and Untethered Soul, and was getting into personal development, spiritual growth, and was listening to podcasts every day. I was starting to get up every morning. By my third semester of the master's, I was waking up at 5 a.m. every morning, go to the gym. I was meditating every day. I was listening to podcasts on my commute to campus. I was showing up when everyone else was just rolling out of bed, and I was like fully like on, and like I was like on like that. I was so clear, and I had such a clear connection with like my heart and my mind, and I was journaling regularly. And there was one day where I like journaled like 4 pages, and I was like, wait, this isn't what I want to be doing. Like, I don't want to be doing this master's program. Like, I want to be having more of an impact in people's lives. Like, I love cartography. There's a lot of things I appreciate about it, but I was starting to envision a future as this path, like with this path and with this degree. And I was like, this no longer feels in alignment with the version of me that I am and want to become. And so I wrote that in March of 2018, and then kind of ignored it. I was like, oh, I'm almost done. I got this opportunity to go to Melbourne, Australia to do my master's thesis on augmented and virtual reality, which sounded super awesome. I was like, oh, this sounds really cool.
What year is this?
This is 2018.
Okay, so Oculus and all that was already around.
Yeah, they're starting. Yeah, so I'm like, oh, this. I didn't have much background on that stuff, but I was like, this. I could tell there's a lot of like, this is where the future of a lot of these things are going. So I'm like, this is awesome that I get to be doing something with this. And then I got to Melbourne, Australia, and I loved it there. I've
been there too.
One of my Danish classmates, we got to go work with a colleague of our program coordinator. She helped set it up. But I got there and was trying to write my research proposal for my thesis. And I was coming up with all this resistance, but it wasn't just like the typical resistance of like, oh, this is difficult, but I need to do it. It was like my body physically wouldn't do it. And I was like starting to feel physically ill and just like off. And it was like the day before it was due, and I was trying to push through, and my body was just like not having it. So it was like the afternoon, I went to take a nap. I ended up sleeping for like 12 hours straight, something ridiculous like that. And I woke up like, yeah, I reread what I had written to myself like a couple months prior. It's like, yeah, what am I doing? And simultaneously, right before this decision, I was actually reading 2 books in tandem, like, while I was in Melbourne. I was reading The Alchemist, or I just finished The Alchemist and The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. Profound combo to be reading like simultaneously. And I just felt super powerful. Like, up in that point, I had this like these parts of myself speaking to me of like, this isn't what you're supposed to be doing. But I was like, what is my program coordinator going to think? And she helped me get this awesome opportunity. I don't want to like spit in her face. What's my mom going to think? What are my siblings going to think? What are my classmates going to think? What are other people going to think if I like make it 3/4 of the way through this master's and then like give up, or like if people think that I give up? And I had enough self-confidence built up, in part reading those 2 books really helped like put me in an energy of like literally like not giving a fuck and like really following my heart, that I was able to sit down. I had all this resistance to write the extended research proposal, but I sat down and wrote like if it was printed out, it would have been like 2.5 or 3 page letter to my program coordinator because I wanted to express my gratitude to her. Like she helped get all this funding from the European Union. I didn't pay a single dime for my master's program. It was all covered with scholarships, and I got €1,000 a month stipend to live on. So like I was getting paid to study, and it was super profound. I'm super grateful for the experience. I got to connect with all these beautiful humans. I got to travel around Europe and travel in Australia and Southeast Asia on the way there. And there was so many other things that were really valuable about it. And it was a really powerful thing to be able to look at it and like not look at it so binary of like, oh, like it wasn't worth my time, or like, or making any judgment of like not finishing. Cause I got to a point where it was like, who am I doing this for? Like if I've already admitted to myself that I don't give a fuck about having this piece of paper saying I'm a master of cartography, then why put it off for another 6 months when I've already determined, like, I kept telling myself, when you're done, you can do something else. You can do what you want to do. And it's like, especially after losing my dad and not having time, like tomorrow guaranteed, I was like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, why don't I just decide right now and like take ownership of my life and do the thing, even though people may not understand. And so that moment was actually probably the most profound moment in my life, in the sense of like feeling empowered. Like all the micro moments of coming out were really important and really helped to build my self-trust and self-confidence. But that moment of like withdrawing from my master's while I was in Australia, without consulting anyone else, I just fucking did it. But I knew that if I tried to talk to later, my mom, like I may allow them to convince me otherwise, but I was just like, no, like I've already determined, like I know what I'm going to do. And I had enough awareness of like getting into growth mindset and these concepts, like for the year and a year or so leading up to that I was like, there's no true way of knowing, forecasting the future of like whether this is the right or wrong decision, other than me like trusting, like I get to make it so like by me choosing this, like I get to then write the story of my life and then look back and say like that was the right decision for me. Or I could fall into this other route of being like, oh, like I shouldn't have done that. But like either way, it's up to me how I frame that. So I was like, yeah, I did it and got to travel around Australia for a bit, moved back home, worked that whole summer, and had a specific goal of I'm going to work 6 months and save 20 grand so I can go travel for 6 months. Had that big goal, moved back home with my mom. I worked from mid-May to mid-October, and by mid-October of 2018, and 21 grand in my savings account. Was able to travel around the States, and then I went to live in Bali for 3 months. And that was a whole nother leveling up of getting to the first time I spent over 2 grand for an event was in Bali for this 4-day thing with a bunch of creatives, entrepreneurs, coaches. And I originally went over for a friend's yoga retreat, which was over $1 grand. So it was like being in this new energy of like, oh, like that seemed unattainable or out of reach before. But now it's like, I can comfortably do this without feeling stress. And before I even attended this event that I found out about, I was in Bali for a couple months and just sharing my story. People started like asking me like, wait, have you considered being a life coach, or are you a life coach? Like me just sharing. And I hadn't even really been presented with that as an option before that. So that just started to open up my mind to what's possible. Like before I withdrew from a master's program, I already started having these ideas of creating like some type of blog or podcast, because podcasts were so impactful for me. And my mission started.
And look at you now.
I got this tattoo in Bali. But even back before I withdrew from my master's, I was already in this energy of like the concept of thriving and helping people to thrive was starting to become like my purpose, and feel really what I was called to do is like discover for myself how to thrive, how to take care of myself, regulate my nervous system, how to reprogram my mind, how to actually process and become aware of my emotions and learn how to feel and deal with them maturely, how to connect more deeply with people by being just authentic, how to feel more freedom to be myself by not giving as much weight to what other people think or how they perceive of me. And so, yeah, being in Bali, it was just like, it like blew open the doors of like showing more and more possibility of what's possible, meeting all these people that are like these really heart-centered entrepreneurs, these people with a desire to impact people's lives, and they're getting to travel, they're getting to live remote, like work remotely or nomadically. They're getting to make money through serving other people and empowering other people. And so that was like, okay, I got back from that and I'm like, I want to be a life coach. And so got back in 2019, was working the same job, but wasn't as clear on like an intention. And so, got to do different trips, but I knew like I wanted to explore this path of life coaching as one of the ways I supported people. And so that brought me into a whole new arena of facing my shit and recognizing all this doubts, these limiting beliefs, getting caught up in this comparison vortex of like, oh, like who am I? These people have something I don't, or like there's something inherently wrong with me or broken, because I was coming up with all this resistance, and it was like, maybe this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing. So I battled a lot of that, especially in 2020. I was doing some different programs. Just felt like feeling a lot of frustration and questioning, like, is this actually something that's possible for me? And then feeling really isolated too. So I was going back home and just not around a lot of people who understood the value of that type of life path, and feeling kind of contracted. And that's something that I've recognized with a lot of my travels, is I would have all this transformation, expansion, like this new version of myself. And then I'd return back home and not fully integrate that or have ways of anchoring that in, and feeling these tentacles of like people's perceptions of me kind of pull me back into old patterns, old insecurities. And it wasn't them doing it that caused it. It's me allowing that to happen. But it's like the recognition that it is really important, the environments we're in and the people we're around. And if we don't truly like take action to integrate those new ways of being, it's really, really easy to slip back into that previous version, because that's already established, or that's how people think and see you. That's how they saw you before you left. And so that has prompted me to start exploring ways of supporting people with more intentional travel and like the integration of travel. Because there's a lot of people talking about integrating after plant medicine ceremonies or psychedelic experiences, or even after other types of maybe conferences or summits or those types of things. But I've recognized like there's a big opportunity to explore how to do that after having like travel experiences, particularly if you, well, regardless whether you're solo or group travel. But there's something about group travel where it's kind of built in, where you have that people that experience that with you, that can at least check in on you, and you know, like they witnessed that. But when you have had solo experiences, it can be really difficult if you don't have some form of support with that. So that's something I'm bringing up. Like current Bryant is exploring ways of offering guidance in that respect.
Can we have a note to, since that's current Bryant, can we have a note to future Bryant? What is it that we would like to share to future Bryant?
A note to future Bryant, or a note from future Bryant?
From future Bryant. Something like, thank you so much, former Bryant, for...
Bryant, thank you so much for all of the steps you've taken, all of the struggles you've navigated, all of the pain you've experienced. Thank you for surviving every day of your life up to this point, for keeping your heart open, for choosing to cultivate a growth mindset, for choosing to show up as authentically as possible, for continuing to strive to discover how to thrive. Thank you for forgiving yourself when you fall short. Thank you for prioritizing the people in your life. Thank you for allowing yourself to be adventurous and explorative and curious. Thank you for being open to a new perspective on spirituality. Thank you for embracing your sexuality. Thank you for empowering other people through your words and through your actions. Thank you for navigating and experiencing the depression and anxiety and the frustration and the shame and the grief and the guilt, so that you can better empathize with people and show people a way through that. Thank you for thank you for allowing yourself to share your big ideas and your dreams with others. And thank you for allowing yourself to be seen and heard and supported. Thank you for increasing your capacity for love and connection and creativity. It's all building towards a more beautiful world, and it's allowing you to more fully embody the role of a Thrival guide. And every seemingly insignificant moment up until this point is a necessary component. All the financial frustrations, all the self-doubt, all the limiting beliefs, all the suffering. Such a badass and have been able to alchemize everything up until this point, and you continue to do so. Thank you for learning to live and laugh and lead and listen and love more fully. Thank you for expressing yourself as authentically as possible, and for discovering how to deepen that with each new day. Thank you for listening to your intuition, your soul. Thank you for all the times that you chose not to listen as well, to see the contrast, to notice, to be able to fine tune and recognize the difference between that inner guidance and the noise or the conditioning from others. Thank you for being beautifully, uniquely, vibrantly yourself. Thank you for putting yourself in positions to be surrounded by incredible, heart-centered humans, such as my brother Tyler. Thank you for showing up and saying yes to things that are uncomfortable, that are challenging. Thank you for all the conversations you've had off the record that have prepared you to start showing up and recording conversations that will be profoundly impactful.
Thank you for your courageous action in presence, the perpetual presence that you show up with. Thank you for being a shining example of how to be a heart-centered listener and be a dear friend, to show up for people in support, allow those emotional dips and those drops, yet staying in a high vibration through it, being an empathetic listener, sharing support and love and compassion. Thank you for being so selfless in your giving, the way that you show up for people. It's absolutely incredible. My goodness. I mean, Chris just got to attend Arcadia because he said, let's get Chris to go to Arcadia. Let's pool our resources, get him a ticket. So incredibly beautiful, brother. The way you capture videos in the midst of everybody said they have these magic moments where they're in complete flow state, and you do it with such elegance and tapping into your incredible creativity and vibrancy, the way that you influence and impact others with your incredibly gentle and yet clear, focused conversation, communication, incredible hugs. Bro, thank you for embodying your thrivalness, your thriviosity, to be able to show up as the Thrival guide for so many other souls in this journey. Since we're speaking from future tense back, thank you for guiding thousands of incredible, beautiful souls to discover even more about themselves, as you put it, internal and external exploration. Brother, oh my goodness. That was magic prayer, blessing, affirmation, truth coming from future self. Oh my goodness. I have chills running through my body. My hand has been on my heart this whole time. Bro, wow.
Thank you. So grateful for you, brother. So appreciative of the invitation to hop on this podcast. Had so much excitement to hop on and intertwine with that nervousness and resistance. Like, what am I going to talk about? Like, I don't know, so much to talk about. It's overwhelming and exciting because there's many more conversations to be had, and so much more I'd love to share with you on your podcast at some point, of just the vision I have and some of the other moments that have been integral into getting me to where I am today, to getting me sharing the parts of the story of joining the Fit for Service community, and how that's been its own, just how much exponentially that and continues to do so. So love to, in our next segment, dive into that a little bit more. Yeah, feeling so alive, so open right now. Just, I've had a desire to start a podcast for years now, and have put it off for various reasons, and no more. It's time.
So guess what? This is part one. This is intro to the Thrival guide himself, Mr. Bryant Michael Huether. And then part two gets to show up on your podcast.
Beautiful.
Yep.
Let's grow.
Yeah, brother. Wow. Well, okay. Please let everyone, all our incredible soul fam that's tuned in, tapped in, turned on, listening as we speak right here, right meow. How do they get in touch with you?
So my Instagram is bryant.michael.huether. And
how do you spell that?
BRYANT, Bryant, like Kobe, rest in peace. And then .Michael, my middle name, which is my dad's name. .HUE, like hue, like in color, THER. So again, that's BRYANT.MICHAEL.HUETHER. It's my Instagram.
I can't believe there's Hugh in your last name. Of course, there's Hugh.
And yeah, Instagram is the best way to find me right now. As I build out my other stuff, share more of that as well. But we'll be building out YouTube and
do we have the thrivalguide.com?
It is taken by someone else, but I might be able to purchase it. I need to look into that again.
Do we have any other resources, any other places or channels, any names that we could send? Remember, this is future Bryant speaking back in gratitude for what present Bryant is doing with courageous action.
I have a YouTube, but I think you can find me with the same, my whole name. Yeah, there's a few videos.
All right, so you hear that? Go with the whole name. Bryant Michael Huether.
Yeah.
All right, brother, this has been such a pleasure, such a privilege. Thank you so much for embodying, actually, look at that, Arcadia, a more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible, and a reminder that this moment really is the best moment. Thank you, Michael. You transform for providing these awesome bracelets. Incredible retreats frequently, by the way, if you want to come around to the Dallas kind of area. There's one actually happening really soon. So much love, brother, until part 2. And thank you so much for hopping on. Thank you for sharing even more of the facets of the multidimensional crystal of creation in which you are. And thank you for showing up and being my friend.
Infinite gratitude, brother. I love you so very much. Every part of you. Thank you for being vibrantly, marvelously, uniquely, thrivingly you.
Catch you on the next one. Like, subscribe, ring that bell, all that jazz. Much love, fam. Talk soon.